During World War II, a time when survival had no mercy. Amid the chaos, a Japanese businessman named Saito was being transported back to Japan with a group of captured men, doomed to live as slaves for their own country. Unlike the others, Saito was kept apart, locked away alone. Soon, 2 guards marched him to the ship's commander. The man looked at him with cold hatred. "Betraying your country isn't something you can be forgiven for," he said sharply. "Death would be too easy for you. You'll live and regret it." Moments later, another prisoner was dragged in, a British soldier named Bronson, his face full of rage and defiance. The commander's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Fine," he said. "You two can share your punishment." In an instant, the guards shackled their ankles together with iron cuffs. Bronson snapped, shouting, "Shoot me if you have to, but don't chain me to a damn Japanese." But no one listened. The order was final. Then, out of nowhere, the sound of explosions tore through the air. Enemy aircrafts were attacking the ship. Prisoners revolted, guards panicked, and chaos erupted. Seizing the moment, Saito and Bronson fought their way out together. A submarine appeared from the fog and launched a missile. The blast ripped the ship apart. In the final seconds, the commander drew his gun to kill them, but Bronson grabbed Saito and dove into the sea just as the ship exploded into flames. Hours later, half dead, Bronson managed to pull Saito to the shore of a deserted island before collapsing. When Saito woke the next morning, he thought it was over, a bad dream, maybe. But then he looked down and saw the chain still around his leg. The nightmare was real. He tried shaking Bronson awake, but the man was out cold. A dead soldier had washed up nearby. Saito picked up the man's gun and aimed it at Bronson, thinking ending him was his only way to freedom. But before he could pull the trigger, Bronson lunged up and attacked. The 2 men wrestled violently across the beach, their chains clanking against the rocks. And just when it seemed one might win, a horrifying scream echoed from the sea. Bronson shoved Saito toward the water, but blood from Saito's wounded leg was already drifting through the waves, drawing something unseen and monstrous closer with every second. The creature lunged from the dark waves and dragged Bronson down with terrifying force. It moved like lightning, razor claws flashing in the moonlight. Saito snatched up the gun and, for a split second, aimed it at Bronson. But instead of pulling the trigger on him, he turned and fired at the beast. The shot echoed across the island. The creature shrieked, recoiled, and slipped back into the black water. Bronson lay wounded, his breath ragged. In that moment, both men realized something: they weren't each other's worst enemy anymore. There was something far more dangerous on this island. They made an uneasy truce. Survival was the only goal now. As they moved inland, Bronson asked what that thing was, but they didn't share a language. Saito only nodded, pretending to understand, though his uneasy expression said otherwise. He knew what he had seen, something unnatural, something he didn't dare name. For a while, he stayed silent, lost in thought, wondering if escape was even possible. But the hopelessness in his eyes said it all. He knew death was coming. Bronson snapped him out of it. "You've lost your damn mind," he said, pulling out the last bullet from the gun and handing it to Saito. "We're not dying here. Not without a fight." The plan was clear: if the creature came again, they'd face it together. Soon, debris from the wrecked ship began washing ashore, bits of supplies, torn crates, and a few personal belongings. Bronson rummaged through the wreckage and found a pack of cigarettes. He tossed it to Saito, but Saito refused, his eyes heavy with sadness and exhaustion. As Bronson kept searching, his hands froze. There, half buried in the sand, lay the body of a young soldier, his own comrade. Bronson's anger broke into grief. "He was just a kid," he whispered, voice trembling. "He would have lived, if the damn Japanese hadn't started this war." Saito didn't understand the words, but he understood the pain. He offered Bronson some water, and Bronson accepted quietly. As night began to fall, the 2 men worked together, scavenging whatever they could find to build a small camp. The chain between them clanked with every movement, a constant reminder of their shared fate. When Bronson tried to slip on his boots, he winced in pain. The cuffs cut into his ankles, making it impossible. Saito noticed, then glanced at his own feet. He was wearing boots he had taken from a dead soldier, much too big for him. Without a word, he took one off and handed it to Bronson. For the first time, there was no hatred in either of their eyes, only a quiet understanding born from survival. Bronson refused the boot outright. "I'm not wearing anything that belongs to a Japanese," he said sharply, pushing it back. Saito didn't argue. Instead, he wandered toward the shore, caught a few crabs, and cooked them over a small fire for his reluctant companion. Bronson hadn't eaten in days. At first, he hesitated, pride still holding him back, but hunger always wins. He reached for the crab, only for it to slip from his hands and fall into the sand. Without a word, Saito handed over his own portion. Bronson tried to refuse, but Saito insisted, placing it gently beside him. Finally, Bronson gave in. The first bite changed everything. It was warm, simple, and real. For the first time, he smiled. Over the next few hours, something unexpected happened. The silence between them started to fade. Bronson began to talk, slow and cautious, trying to explain who he was. Saito couldn't understand much, but he listened carefully, even managing to repeat Bronson's name correctly. Then he said, "Saito," pointing to himself. Bronson nodded. Two enemies, now learning each other's names. As they sat near the fire, Bronson glanced at the chains still binding them. "So what do we do about these?" he asked. Saito didn't answer. But Bronson wasn't the type to wait. He found a sharp piece of metal from the wreckage and started hammering at the chain. Sparks flew, but the iron held firm. Frustrated, he stopped. Then Saito quietly pointed with his foot toward a thinner, weaker section of the chain and muttered something in Japanese. Bronson didn't understand the words, but the gesture was clear. He gave it another try. 2 hard strikes later, the link bent and loosened. Now it was Sato's turn. He held out his hand for the improvised tool. Bronson hesitated, unsure if he could trust him, but then handed it over. Saito positioned the blade against Bronson's cuff. "I can't watch this," Bronson muttered, covering his eyes. Saito chuckled softly and brought the weapon down in a single clean hit. The chain snapped. Bronson's eyes flew open, his leg was free. He jumped up, laughing with relief. For the first time, they celebrated together. Their brief moment of joy didn't last. The sound of their laughter echoed through the jungle, and Saito suddenly froze. Something was moving in the darkness, something listening. They both raised their makeshift weapons, scanning the shadows. The rustling stopped. The unseen creature slipped away. Cautious now, they followed the tracks in the sand. Saito crouched, studying strange claw marks leading toward the trees. Then a distant voice broke the silence. They turned, and saw 3 figures approaching. 2 Japanese soldiers, and a captured prisoner. Bronson's gut twisted. He thought Saito would run back to his own people and betray him. But instead, Saito did something he didn't expect. He handed his weapon to Bronson and said quietly, "Hide." Then he stepped out into the open. As the soldiers neared the camp, one of them caught the scent of cooked food. "Someone's here," he muttered, walking toward the boiling pot. Saito stood up slowly, hands raised. "Don't shoot," he said in Japanese. Bronson, hidden in the shadows, watched tensely. The soldiers didn't know that Saito had been branded a traitor. Believing him to be one of their own, they lowered their guns. Saito started questioning them. "Did anyone else survive?" he asked. One of the men replied grimly, "Only us. The rest drowned. We had life jackets." Back near the trees, Bronson suddenly felt something cold behind him. His breath caught. The realization hit, the creature was back. The air grew still, thick with dread. He turned, trembling, eyes scanning the darkness. Then, just as quickly as it came, the sound was gone. The jungle went silent again. Whatever it was, it had vanished, for now. The Japanese soldiers surrounded Saito, their eyes sharp with suspicion. "Are you sure there's no one else here?" one of them asked coldly. Saito nodded calmly. "I'm alone." But the men weren't convinced. They had already spotted a few traces, prints, ashes, something that didn't add up. One soldier unsheathed his sword. "Before the ship went down," he said, "there was a rumor. A traitor and an enemy soldier were chained together." He kicked the sand near Sato's feet, then tore the cloth off his leg. The shackle mark told them everything. Saito was the traitor. Another soldier stepped forward, pressing the blade to Sato's throat. "Where's the fugitive?" he demanded. Saito hesitated, then pointed toward a small grave on the hill, where Bronson's fallen friend was buried. "He's dead," Saito said quietly. The men exchanged doubtful looks. "He's not just a traitor," one sneered. "He's a liar. Tell us the truth, or I'll slit your throat." Before Saito could speak, a deafening roar ripped through the island. The ground trembled. Everyone froze. A captured prisoner fell to his knees, screaming, "Whatever that thing is, it's not human." He began praying desperately, his voice shaking. One of the soldiers barked an order. "You! Go check it out," he told the youngest among them. The soldier nodded nervously and moved toward the jungle. He didn't know Bronson was hiding nearby. As he stepped over a dry branch, it cracked under his boot. Bronson froze. The soldier turned sharply toward the sound, but before he could take another step, a low growl echoed through the trees. He panicked and ran, stumbling through the dark until he reached a cave entrance. He didn't realize the creature was already there, camouflaged among the rocks. Bronson, still hidden, saw him disappear inside. He wanted to help, but it was too late. Inside the cave, the beast emerged from the shadows. The soldier swung his sword in terror, slicing the air, but the monster was too fast. With one brutal strike, it snapped his arm like a twig. His screams echoed across the island. Outside, hearing the cries, another soldier turned on Saito, blaming him. "This is your doing," he shouted and lunged. But before he could strike, Bronson burst from hiding, tackled the man, and shot him dead. The gunshot was like a signal. A moment later, the creature hurled the severed head of the first soldier toward them, roaring so loud it shook the trees. Saito and Bronson dove for cover as chaos erupted. The monster tore through the camp, ripping apart the wounded soldier, then leapt toward the screaming prisoner and crushed him in seconds. Bronson and Saito watched in horror from the distance. There was no more doubt, the island itself had turned into a death trap. "Run," Saito whispered. They took off into the jungle. The creature saw them and gave chase, its guttural growls following close behind. Saito hacked through vines with a machete, carving a path while Bronson panted behind him. "Wait! I have a plan!" Bronson shouted, but his words were lost in translation. Saito didn't understand, he just kept running. Bronson tripped, fell behind, and the creature was on him in seconds. He fired his last bullet, it missed. The click of the empty gun was his death sentence. The monster wrapped its claws around his throat, lifting him off the ground. Then, Saito came charging back. He struck the beast with everything he had, buying Bronson a second to break free. Together, they fled into the forest, crashing through branches until the ground gave way beneath them. They tumbled down a steep slope, landing hard among rocks. When dawn broke, both men were barely alive. Saito groaned as he pulled a sharp splinter from his chest, blood soaking his shirt. A few feet away, Bronson lay sprawled on a rotted log hanging over a waterfall. As he tried to move, the wood cracked and swung dangerously. He lost balance, then fell, hitting a rock before plunging into the water below. Under the surface, everything blurred. The flashbacks of their first attack flickered in his mind, the chaos, the screams, the creature's claws. Somehow, he managed to swim to shore, gasping for air. On the opposite side, Saito dragged himself to his feet. Among the scattered wreckage, he spotted something glinting in the sunlight, a fallen soldier's katana. He picked it up slowly, gripping it tight. Whatever this thing was, he knew their fight wasn't over yet. They split up and follow the river, each moving faster than he should. From above the falls a blood-chilling scream rips through the jungle, both men hear it and freeze. Saito, bent to drink, drops the cup and plunges into the undergrowth to find his friend. Bronson keeps climbing until a great waterfall bars his path, evening is closing in and they're still apart. Saito combs the riverbank until exhaustion, but Bronson is nowhere to be found. At the falls Bronson rests, then hears noises nearby and grows alert. Stepping out of the deeper shade, he sits at the edge and suddenly senses something beside him. He turns and finds a huge crocodile lying motionless. It watches him for a long, heartbeat-filled moment, then slips back into the water. Bronson rises, unnerved, and pushes on up the cliff, only to slip. At the same instant he spots the creature Saito had been tending to, the thing that had been dressing Sato's wounds. He realizes with a cold clarity that this is no mindless monster. It can think, it can heal itself. He tries to warn Saito but makes a noise instead, then retreats, hiding to watch as the creature moves toward the riverbank. Suddenly the crocodile attacks. Crimson floods the water as the reptile struggles, then the creature erupts from the surf and rips the crocodile in two. Bronson is stricken with terror. The creature screams again, a scream that reaches Saito deep in the trees. Bronson bolts. Saito, still lost in the jungle, stumbles and finds a body tied to a tree. Horror sends him sprawling into a pit, where he finds a severed head like the others. After staring until the nausea fades he realizes the head is dead and a spark of hope ignites. Maybe they can fight back. He scavenges the corpse and finds a pistol and spent shells, evidence that the man killed the creature. Now armed with a katana and a pistol, Saito decides he will hunt this thing. He follows a trail to the carcass of a broken plane and wades through waist-high water into the wreckage. Inside he finds useful scraps. Meanwhile Bronson discovers another piece of the same plane and fashions a crude weapon from scrap metal before entering. There he finds a flare gun, lighters, cigarettes, and other salvaged items. His eye catches something lodged in the wing, a bomb. An idea sparks. He rests, lights a cigarette, and then hears steps. Saito appears. Bronson offers a smoke. Saito refuses but shows him something urgent. Using his lighter, Saito leads Bronson deeper into a cave where, to both their horror, they see a female of the species brooding over another egg. Saito warns him, stay away, a mother will defend her nest with terrifying ferocity, but Bronson, blood and fear and stubbornness coiling inside him, says he won't leave until he kills it. Saito tried to reason with him, explaining that killing the female would only make the others even more dangerous. They'd hunt them down no matter what. But Bronson refused to back off. "Either it lives, or we do," he said coldly. He already had a plan. Pulling out the bomb he'd found in the wrecked plane, he told Saito to help him carry it to the creature's nest. It took all their strength to drag the explosive through the dense jungle, and by the time they reached the cave, the trigger mechanism had bent out of shape. Bronson tried fixing it, but Saito panicked. "We need to leave now. This thing could blow any second," he warned. Meanwhile, the female was already on her way back to the nest. Bronson remembered the emergency hammer inside the plane, something they could use, but someone had to stay behind to arm the bomb. Saito took a deep breath and said quietly, "We're here because of me. I'll stay." Before either could say another word, the mother's roar echoed through the cavern. They rushed outside. Bronson lit a flare, the red glow slicing through the dark. While Saito stood guard, Bronson fought to free the hammer wedged inside the plane. He tugged with all his strength, metal scraping against metal. Then, out of nowhere, one of the creatures lunged at Saito. The two clashed violently. The beast fought with unnerving precision, almost tactical awareness. Finally, Bronson yanked the hammer loose. Saito managed to push the monster toward the plane, giving Bronson a chance to strike. Together they attacked relentlessly, forcing the creature back until, suddenly, the light from the flare began to fade, and the creature was gone. They sprinted back into the cave to finish what they started. Saito stood guard again while Bronson fixed the bomb's latch. Just as it clicked into place, the monster struck from behind. Saito reacted instantly, driving his blade into its chest. He was about to sever its head when the creature slammed him into the wall, then turned on Bronson, slashing brutally. Wounded but defiant, Saito staggered up, grabbed his pistol, and fired, a bullet straight into the monster's eye. It screamed and released Bronson. Saito fired again but missed, then aimed lower, at the nest. The shot hit the egg, and the explosion cracked it open. A small, deformed hatchling fell to the ground. Seeing her baby hurt, the mother erupted in pure rage. Saito rushed to help his friend, but Bronson was dying. With blood on his hands, Bronson handed Saito his gear and whispered, "Go, now." Saito hesitated, pain and guilt in his eyes, but finally ran for the exit. Behind him, the mother creature crouched over her child as Bronson armed the bomb. He started the countdown, 3, 2, and nothing. The bomb didn't go off. Then he remembered Saito's words, the trick he'd mentioned earlier. Bronson made the adjustment, and this time it worked. A massive explosion ripped through the cave, visible even from miles away. From the distance, Saito watched the fireball rise and knew his friend was gone. Tears mixed with ash on his face, but then he heard it, that same terrifying roar echoing from the trees. The creature was still alive. Without looking back, Saito turned and ran, crashing through the bushes as the furious mother thundered after him through the burning jungle. Saito finally reached the shoreline and collapsed to his knees, completely drained and broken. The sound of crashing waves echoed in his ears, mixing with the memory of his fallen friend. But then, something inside him shifted. He remembered Bronson's sacrifice, the courage in his eyes during those final moments. Anger and determination replaced his despair. He stood up slowly, gripping his weapon tightly. Moments later, the enraged mother creature emerged from the trees, screeching in fury. When she saw Saito kneeling in the sand, she charged straight at him, only to fall into a trap. Saito leapt up from the sand and faced her head-on. He slashed at the beast, but she struck back hard, tearing through his arm. Bleeding and shaking, he still refused to back down. He staggered to his feet again and shouted, "You wanted revenge for your baby? Come and get it." The creature lunged, and Saito thrust his blade upward, cutting deep into her abdomen. The mother let out a piercing scream before collapsing onto the sand, gasping. Saito walked closer, breathing heavily. He raised his sword, but instead of killing her, he drove the blade into the ground beside her. He looked into the creature's fading eyes, as if to say, "It ends here." Then he turned away, picking up a broken flare gun from the sand. He tried to fire it, hoping to signal for help, but the flare was cracked and useless. His last bit of hope faded with the dying light. Exhausted and wounded, Saito fell onto the sand and passed out as the waves rolled against the shore. Hours later, he woke up aboard an American rescue ship. A naval officer stood over him with a Japanese translator beside him. The officer began questioning him. "Did Bronson help you survive?" Saito didn't answer. The translator repeated the question, then asked, "What was your crime?" Saito looked down, his voice low but firm. "I killed my own commander," he said. "He was leading my men to their deaths for nothing." The room went silent. The officer exchanged glances with the translator, then softly asked, "Was anyone else alive on that island?" Saito shook his head. No one survived. As the ship sailed away from the cursed island, Saito stared out the window at the distant shore. The smoke from the explosion still lingered above the trees. But deep in the jungle, faint movement stirred. The camera slowly panned in, revealing more shadowy shapes slithering through the mist. The nightmare wasn't over. The island still belonged to them. This is how our story ends here.